The crisp Canadian air was filled with the soft sounds of rustling leaves and distant birdsong as Shawn packed up his fishing gear. It had been a rewarding day by the river, his cooler filled with fresh catches. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting golden hues across the water. Normally, he would take the familiar trail home, but that evening, something urged him to take a shortcut through the dense forest. As he navigated through the thick brush, his boots crunching against fallen leaves, an eerie silence settled around him. Then, out of nowhere, a massive black bear emerged from the shadows, just a few feet away. Shawn's breath caught in his throat. The bear was gigantic, its dark fur bristling under the fading sunlight. It stood so close that he could see its warm breath fogging in the cool air. Every survival instinct in his body screamed for him to retreat, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had read about bear encounters before, running would only trigger an attack. Slowly, he raised his arms, making himself look bigger, hoping the bear wouldn't see him as prey. Then, something unexpected happened. The bear didn't charge. Instead, it let out a deep, agonized whine and sank onto its haunches. Shawn's heart pounded. This wasn't a bear ready to attack, it was a bear in distress. His eyes darted across its massive body, and that's when he saw it, wounds. Deep gashes ran along the bear's flank, and its front legs bore nasty cuts. Had it been in a fight? Had it been shot? Despite the injuries, it made no move to harm him. Shawn took a slow step back, debating whether to leave. But then, the bear let out another heart-wrenching cry, its sorrow echoing through the silent woods. That sound, a mother's desperate call, sent chills down his spine. Then, he remembered. Earlier that morning, from his fishing spot, he had spotted a mother bear and her cub across the river, playing near the rocks. Could this be the same bear? And if so, where was her cub now? The realization struck him like lightning. The cub was missing. Something was terribly wrong. Summoning his courage, Shawn did the unthinkable, he took a cautious step forward. The bear lifted its heavy head, locking eyes with him. In that moment, there was an unspoken understanding. She wasn't calling for herself. She was calling for help. Then, the bear turned and limped away, stopping briefly to glance back at him, as if urging him to follow. Shawn hesitated only for a second before pushing his fear aside. If the cub was in danger, he had to act now. The deeper they went into the woods, the more frantic the mother bear became. She sniffed the air, let out soft, distressed growls, and quickened her pace despite her injuries. Then, through the trees, Shawn heard it, a desperate, high-pitched cry coming from the river ahead. His stomach dropped. Bursting through the brush, he found himself standing at the river's edge. His eyes darted around until they landed on the tiny, struggling form in the raging waters, the cub. The little bear was barely holding onto a jagged rock, its claws slipping, its body trembling with exhaustion. The rushing current was relentless, threatening to tear it away at any moment. Shawn had no time to think. He grabbed his fishing line, tied one end to a sturdy tree, and looped the other around his waist. Then, without hesitation, he plunged into the freezing water. The current was far stronger than he expected. It slammed into him, threatening to pull him under. But he was a former Marine, he had fought worse battles than this. Clenching his jaw, he swam harder. The cub's claws finally slipped from the rock, and in an instant, it was swept downstream. No! Shawn roared, pushing his body beyond its limits. He dove, reaching out, just as the cub tumbled toward him. His fingers latched onto its scruff just in time. The force of the river yanked against them both, testing the limits of the rope. Water filled Shawn's mouth, burning his lungs, but he refused to let go. With one final burst of strength, he pulled himself and the cub toward the shore. He collapsed onto the riverbank, gasping for air. The cub lay limp in his arms, exhausted but breathing. It was alive. Then, a rustling sound made him look up, the mother bear was there. The mother bear, despite her wounds, staggered toward them. Shawn's body tensed. Would she see him as a threat? But as she reached them, her massive head dipped low, her snout nudging her cub gently. A soft, relieved sound escaped her. The cub stirred, blinking up at its mother before letting out a weak cry. Then, using the last of its strength, it crawled toward her warm embrace. Shawn's chest tightened. He had never witnessed anything so pure, so powerful, a mother and child, reunited against all odds. But the mother bear swayed, her body too weak to stand any longer. Shawn knew she was running on sheer instinct, but her wounds were severe. She wouldn't make it without help. Then, from the distance, voices. Shawn turned to see a group of rangers and hikers rushing toward them. They had witnessed everything. The rangers quickly tended to the mother bear's injuries, wrapping her wounds before carefully transporting her and the cub to a wildlife rescue station. For days, Shawn waited anxiously for updates. Finally, the news came, both mother and cub had survived. After surgery and weeks of care, they were strong enough to be released. On the day of their release, Shawn stood beside the rangers as they opened the cage in a protected part of the forest. The mother bear bolted into the trees, eager for freedom. But the cub, the same cub Shawn had nearly died saving, paused. For a long moment, it looked back at him. Their eyes met, and in that single glance, Shawn felt something shift inside him. Then, with a final blink, the cub turned and disappeared into the wild. Shawn stood there, his heart full. He would probably never see them again, but he didn't need to. Somewhere deep in the forest, a mother and child lived because of him. And that was enough. From that day forward, Shawn's life changed. He became deeply involved in wildlife conservation, sharing his story to inspire others. He had always loved the outdoors, but now he understood something deeper: every life matters, no matter how small. And it all started with a shortcut through the woods, and a bear's desperate cry for help. Shawn's story teaches us a profound lesson about courage, compassion, and our responsibility toward nature. In life, we often encounter moments where fear tells us to walk away, but true bravery lies in stepping forward when help is needed. Shawn could have ignored the mother bear's cries, but instead, he chose to listen, act, and risk his own safety to save another life. His actions remind us that small decisions, choosing empathy over indifference, action over hesitation, can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Beyond bravery, this story highlights the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child, a force so powerful that even in pain, the mother bear sought help rather than giving up. It mirrors our own relationships, how love drives us to protect, sacrifice, and endure hardship for those we care about. Moreover, Shawn's transformation shows that when we help others, we also change ourselves. By saving the cub, he found a renewed sense of purpose, dedicating his life to wildlife conservation. This reminds us that every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Sometimes, the greatest purpose in life comes from answering a call for help.